18 years. That's how long I ran that warehouse. I knew every shelf, every pallet, every barcode scanner that acted up when it rained. I was there before sunrise and often left after sunset. I trained every rookie who ever touched a forklift in that building. I worked through flu seasons, heat waves, and supply chain meltdowns. I didn't have a fancy title, but the place ran because I did. People used to joke that I was part of the building. If Victor's not here, check if the roof's still on. And I liked it that way. Quiet pride. No need for applause. So when I got called into Mark's office on a rainy Tuesday morning, I wasn't nervous. I figured it was another scheduling reshuffle or maybe a budget review. What I didn't expect was Sarah from HR already sitting there. She didn't look me in the eyes. Mark, on the other hand, leaned back in his chair like he was getting ready to sell me a used car. He wore that slimy smile that never quite touched his eyes, the one he always used before delivering bad news he didn't want to own. "Victor," he started, clasping his hands like a preacher. "You've been invaluable to this company. 18 years is no small thing." I just looked at him, waiting. He cleared his throat. "But unfortunately, we're restructuring some of our operations, trying to optimize costs. You understand how it is." There it was, the word. Optimize. Then came the real punch. "Honestly," he added with a smirk, "we can hire 3 junior logistics associates for what we pay you. It's not personal, just numbers." Not personal, just numbers. That's what 18 years boiled down to, a line item in a spreadsheet, a dollar sign next to my name. I sat there for a second, letting the words settle. Then I nodded once. "Well," I said, "I hope they're fast learners." Mark looked almost surprised that I didn't argue. He gave me that fake sympathy head tilt. "We'll give you a few days to clear out your things." I stood up. "I'll be gone in 2 hours." I didn't drag it out. Packed up my things. Took down the faded photo of my daughter in her high school cap and gown that hung by my desk. The break room was quiet. A few of the guys came over to shake my hand, but most of them didn't know what to say. I didn't blame them. I walked out without slamming the door or looking back. When I got home, my wife stood in the kitchen, folding laundry. She didn't ask what happened. She just looked at me. "Are you okay?" she asked. "I think so," I said. "Just numb." She nodded, came over, and hugged me. That kind of hug where you don't have to talk. The next day, I slept in. First time in years. No alarm, no safety vest, no clipboard. I felt untethered, like a balloon cut loose from a string. For the first few days, I paced the house like a ghost. I tried watching TV, tried organizing the garage, even tried going fishing, but my hands itched for movement, for responsibility, for something to matter again. Then, on Friday, I got a text from Kevin, one of the younger guys I'd trained up. "Hey Vic, sorry to bug you. Do you remember how to reset the cold storage system when it freezes up? It glitched today and we couldn't get it back online." I smiled. Of course I remembered. I designed the backup workaround myself after corporate refused to upgrade the system 5 years ago. I typed out a quick walkthrough. Within minutes, he texted back, "Lifesaver. Thanks, man." Didn't think much of it. Until the following week, I got a call from Maria, the day shift supervisor. "Vic, I know you're not technically with us anymore," she said, "but do you remember how you handled the quarterly inventory rollover without crashing the database? We're locked out again, and IT is clueless." I chuckled, told her what she needed. Problem solved. Then came the big one. Mark called. His voice was cheerful, but forced. "Victor, hey, just wanted to say again how grateful we are for everything you did here. Look, no pressure, but we're having some challenges with the vendor coordination system. It's that dashboard you built. Nobody seems to know how it works." I leaned back in my chair and looked at the ceiling. "Oh?" "The one I asked to document and train staff on. You told me it wasn't a priority, remember?" He laughed nervously. "Yeah, well, it's a priority now." I didn't gloat. I just listened. He asked if I could hop on a quick Zoom call to walk the team through the system. I agreed, just to be helpful. One call. That turned into 3, then 5. Suddenly, I was being treated like the VIP consultant they couldn't afford to lose, and then came the message that changed everything. It was from a former vendor I used to coordinate with, Miguel, who ran freight logistics for a major supplier. Heard you're no longer with them. That true? If so, I've got a side project that could really use your brain. That's when the light bulb clicked. They thought I was too expensive? They were about to find out what expensive really looks like when you lose the one guy who kept the wheels turning. Miguel's message stuck in my head the entire evening. I hadn't even finished reading it before my fingers were already tapping on the table in that old rhythm I used to do when solving supply problems. He had a freight software integration issue, something about syncing outdated warehouse systems across 3 locations. I asked him to send me the full specs. Spent the night going through it while sipping cold coffee from a chipped mug I used to keep at the warehouse. I mapped the problem in an hour, solved it in 2. The next morning, I emailed him a document titled Simple Fixes for Broken Giants. He called me 20 minutes later laughing, "Man, how are you not running your own consultancy yet?" It hadn't really crossed my mind. For 18 years, I lived inside someone else's system, cleaning up their messes, holding the whole thing together with duct tape and stubbornness. But now, maybe it was time to take the lid off. By the end of the week, Miguel sent me a small contract. Nothing flashy. $2,000 for a 3-day optimization report and a call with his tech team. I didn't even have a business name yet. Just Victor, Independent Operations Consultant, typed in bold on a free invoice template. He paid within hours. 2 days later, another old supplier emailed me. Apparently, Miguel had bragged about me in some industry Zoom. Then came a request from a distribution center in Ohio. Then one from a frozen foods chain in Denver. The requests were small at first. Simple diagnostics, a few spreadsheets, some vendor strategy calls. But every time I solved something, it multiplied. I was no longer Victor from the warehouse. I was Victor, the guy who makes chaos stop. 3 weeks in, I was booked solid. Not full-time, just enough to keep my days occupied and my bank account growing. Then the calls from my old job started shifting in tone. Mark called again, but this time there was no cheer in his voice. "Victor, we've got a bit of a mess here," he said. "The inventory system collapsed during the rollover. It says we might have lost a quarter's worth of shipment data. No one can trace which units went where. Customers are screaming." I asked if they had backups. He hesitated. "You were handling that." I almost laughed. "You mean the automated system I asked for 5 times that got rejected in every budget meeting?" Silence. Then, "Well, is there any way you can maybe just help us out for a few hours? Just this once?" I could hear it. The panic. The tightening of his throat. The realization that maybe firing the guy who built the ship wasn't the best cost-saving plan after all. I told him I'd think about it. In truth, I had already drafted a consulting rate sheet that morning. When I emailed it over, I didn't hold back. $350 per hour, minimum 10 hours, non-negotiable, payment up front. It was steep, uncomfortable even. I expected him to say no. Instead, 5 minutes later, I got an all-caps reply. "Send contract." That's when I knew I wasn't the expensive one. I was the indispensable one. And now they were paying me triple what they used to, just to undo the damage caused by my absence. Over the next few weeks, their emails became a pattern. "Hey Victor, can you remind us how the loading dock shift schedule was balanced? Do you remember the workaround you used for the barcode misreads in freezer unit B? Is there any way you can help us renegotiate with Eastern Freight? They're saying we broke the service terms." I kept answering. At a price. Each time they called, they brought back a piece of the wisdom they threw away so casually during that termination meeting. Meanwhile, I was getting calls from other companies, businesses that actually valued experience. Some asked if I'd join full-time. I politely declined. I wasn't ready to trade one boss for another. I was enjoying the taste of independence. One logistics director from a manufacturing group even said, "We've got 10 guys here with MBAs, and not one of them sees the system as clearly as you do." That one stayed with me. Then, one rainy afternoon, I got a message I wasn't expecting. It was from Kyle, one of the junior associates Mark hired to replace me. The same guys I supposedly cost too much compared to. He wrote, "Hey Victor, I know we've never really talked, but I just wanted to say, I don't know how you did this for 18 years. This place is a mess. We're constantly behind, and every time I try to fix something, someone says, 'That's not how Victor did it.' Just wanted to say respect." That hit different. Later that night, I sat in my little home office, surrounded by printouts, sketches, invoices, and coffee-stained notebooks, and I realized I wasn't trying to get back what I lost. I was building something better, stronger, mine. All those years of putting out fires, of fixing things quietly, of not demanding credit, they were paying off in the most poetic way possible. My phone buzzed again. Another request, another offer, another company needing help. Meanwhile, Mark was buried in the mess he created, and something told me he hadn't even hit the worst part yet. By now, I had clients in 4 states and a whiteboard full of projects. I was finally sleeping better. No more 4 a.m. emergency calls about misplaced inventory. No more bosses pretending their chaos was my fault. Just work that made sense, clients that listened, and money that actually matched the effort. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. I had something better than a job. I had respect. Then came the lunch invitation. Mark emailed it like we were old college friends. "Let's catch up soon, maybe over lunch?" No subject line, no details. Just a vague olive branch from the man who smirked during my termination. I ignored it. 3 days later, a second email came. "Victor, hope you're well. We'd really appreciate a chance to talk about a possible opportunity." That one had a calendar invite attached. I declined. Then he called. I didn't answer. Finally, I got a message from my old colleague Nadia. "Mark's desperate. He wants to hire you back. Full salary, bonus, title upgrade. He even asked HR to draft a re-onboarding package." I stared at my screen, not knowing whether to laugh or sigh. They thought it was just about money. They still didn't get it. A week passed. I was helping a beverage company streamline their cold chain delivery and got invited to speak at a logistics conference in Austin. Me, the guy who used to beg for budget approvals, was now being flown out to teach others how to do the thing I was once fired for. That night in the hotel, I got another message from Mark. This time, he wasn't polite. "Victor, we need to talk. This is bigger than ego. The team is suffering. The board is furious. We're hemorrhaging clients because we can't meet timelines. Whatever you want, name it. We'll make it work." And just like that, the man who once said I was just too expensive was now begging me to name my price. To anyone listening, maybe you've been there, quietly carrying a system on your back, hoping someone notices, only to be told you cost too much. Maybe someone made you feel disposable, like your years meant nothing. I'm here to tell you, your value isn't determined by someone too short-sighted to see it. And if this story resonates, even a little, consider giving this video a like or subscribing. Not because I need the numbers, but because maybe one more story like this will remind someone else. You're not crazy, you're just underappreciated. Back to Mark. He didn't stop. He sent another offer. Then another. Each one more generous, more desperate. First, it was my old salary. Then it was a 20% raise. Then a 30% raise plus flexible hours and the option to rebuild the department your way. The last one included a relocation package, a company car, and an apology note. I didn't reply to any of them. I didn't need to. Because while he was building offers, I was building something else. I had just signed a 6-month retainer with a national food distributor. They'd asked me to revamp their entire operations stack from warehouse mapping to final mile delivery systems. It was the kind of project I used to dream of. Total control, real budget, zero interference. And the best part, They weren't hiring me to replace someone. They hired me because they knew what I could build. They wanted me. Meanwhile, I kept hearing stories from my old workplace. Shipments delayed by weeks. Forklifts sitting idle because no one updated the fuel logs. A vendor who pulled out of a $200,000 contract because they didn't trust the new team. Mark apparently started showing up early, staying late, even shadowing warehouse staff trying to understand why everything was falling apart. One employee joked, "He's finally realizing Victor didn't just press buttons, he was the glue." Eventually, Nadia called again. "He's losing it," she said. "He tried to run a client negotiation himself and accidentally promised same-day delivery for a bulk order. The whole team's scrambling to fix it. People are burning out. He's offering raises to everyone just to stay. Honestly, it's chaos." I thought about writing him back. I even typed out a message once, something like, "You taught me more than you know. Not about business, about worth." But I deleted it. He wouldn't understand. He never did. One evening, I took a walk past the old warehouse, just for the nostalgia. It looked the same from the outside. Same faded paint, same leaning sign, but it felt smaller, like a shadow of the place I gave 18 years to. I stood across the street for a moment. A delivery truck pulled up and no one came to unload it. The driver waited, checked his watch, honked. No answer. I smiled. Then I walked away. Not because I was bitter, because I finally could. I never told Mark no. That's the funny part. He waited. He hoped. He probably stared at his inbox the way I used to, praying for a reply that would fix everything. But I never sent one. He fired me with a smile, thinking I was a cost. He reached back out with a panic, realizing I had been the system. And by then, I'd already stepped into a different life. That's what they never understand, the ones who treat people like replaceable cogs. When you remove the gear that quietly kept everything running, the machine doesn't slow down. It collapses. The truth? I missed parts of it. The rhythm. The smell of the loading docks at sunrise. The way the team would rally around each other before peak season. Those little inside jokes about broken pallet jacks and mislabeled crates. But I didn't miss him. I didn't miss the way every meeting was a reminder of how little they saw me. I didn't miss being invisible until something broke. And I definitely didn't miss the annual reviews where they'd praise my work and still deny my raise due to budget constraints. So I built something else. I called it Grey Line Logistics Consulting, named after the faded grey line painted on the old warehouse floor to separate inbound from outbound shipments. A tiny detail, probably ignored by most. But to me, it was symbolic. The invisible line between chaos and order. Between things arriving and things moving forward. That's what I was good at. Making things move forward. In my first year, I took on 9 clients, completed 13 projects, and made more money than my last 3 years combined. I hired 2 people, both folks who had been laid off from places just like mine. Not because they weren't good enough, but because someone above them didn't understand what they were good at. We worked out of a modest space above a mechanic's garage, drank cheap coffee, and spent more time laughing than stressing. It wasn't flashy, but it was ours. Meanwhile, Mark's company kept popping up in industry circles, but never for good reasons. A missed delivery here, a lawsuit there. A news article even ran, "Local logistics giant stumbles after workforce reshuffle." I didn't need revenge. Watching the truth unfold was enough. And besides, I had bigger things to focus on. One afternoon, a young guy named Trevor reached out, said he used to work under me back in the day. "I never forgot how you treated us like people," he wrote. "Not just workers, real people. I just got let go from another place. They said I wasn't scaling fast enough." Whatever that means. If there's ever a spot on your team, I'd be honored. I hired him the next day. And it hit me then. This was the legacy. Not the company I gave 18 years to. Not the title they dangled like a treat. The legacy was in how people remembered working with me. Not for me. In how they spoke my name when I wasn't in the room. In the way they carried those lessons into the next chapter of their lives. Mark never got that. He thought leadership was about telling people what to do. I always believed it was about listening and lifting, about noticing the one who always stays late without being asked, about asking the quiet guy on the team what he thinks, about knowing that sometimes the person who never complains is the one breaking the most inside. The last time I heard from Mark, he'd left the company. Quiet resignation, no fanfare. Some internal memo thanking him for his years of service. The same cold template I got when they let me go. Fitting, I guess. The man who measured everything in numbers finally became one. As for me, I still wake up early. Still walk the floors of warehouses. Not because I have to, but because I want to. Still sit down with teams and map out workflows with nothing but a pen, a pad, and a good cup of black coffee. Some days I'm in Chicago, other days I'm in rural Arkansas, talking to a third-generation farmer about optimizing grain shipments. And every once in a while, I pass by my old building. It's smaller now, or maybe I've just grown. If you've made it this far, maybe you've lived something like this. Maybe you're still there, in the middle of being undervalued, overlooked, underestimated. Let me tell you, it doesn't have to end there. You can build something else. You can walk away with dignity. And when they call, because they always do, you can smile, sip your coffee, and choose silence, not out of anger, but because your absence says more than your words ever could.